That's it. That's it. We're live. We're live. Welcome, viewers. Welcome, listeners. Yeah, here we go, man. For those of you who are joining me on my first solo live broadcast on my channel, I'm beginning like a beginning of talk with a lot of my friends and so forth, especially amongst my male friends who've been seeing a lot of the craziness and the nonsense that's been going on in the social atmosphere and the push of feminism and a lot of these other things. And, a lot of them share my passion about wanting to push back on some of these narratives. And I always find a lot of them have some really great stories to tell. And one of the first people that came to mind was a very good friend of mine. He housed me when I first got to the UK. He's a dear brother, and I miss him terribly. I wish I could go and spend some more time with him. My good friend Herb. He missed you, man. It's my good friend Herb out in I'll just say Kent, not to give too much away.
Basically one of the only Browns in the village, so it wouldn't be hard to find me. You know what I mean?
Kent is a pretty big county, though. So you're not the only brown guy out there. We'll probably get to that as well about your music and a few other things. But introduce yourself, Herb. Tell the people a little about yourself.
Oh, hello there, everybody. So it's Herb. I've known Brooke for a few years now. Originally came to the UK touring with a not a musical, but a Polynesian dance group. And so I toured the world with them, met my wife here, who's British. So I thought to myself, you know what, I need a visa. So what better way than to marry a British woman? No, I'm just playing. No, I met my wife, moved over here about 14, 15 years ago now. And I've still got my accent from New Zealand. So if you haven't figured it out, I'm a brown boy from New Zealand. I'm Māori, heritage, Polynesian. And so I've been here ever since, got two boys. Two young lads, 5 and 8, and we're just adjusting and continually adjusting to the British culture and to society's culture that's constantly bombarding us with all. So yeah, I'm one of those people that likes to push back, but I'm also like one of those people that likes to be very private at the same time. It's a conundrum.
Yeah, that's a very odd place to be. Now I know you kind of came to prominence as well because you were an MMA fighter. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I as a personal challenge, I decided to just challenge myself. I saw other friends who were moving in the industry. I was inspired by other Polynesians who had made the journey. So while here in England, I thought to myself, well, I've got to challenge myself. I ballooned up with a whole bunch of weight. I got to 356 pounds, I believe it is, whatever that is in kilos. And then I thought, well, that's enough. So I thought, well, I'm going to set myself some goals. And I said, well, I'm going to aim for around 260 pounds. Once I drop down to 260 pounds, then I'm looking to get in the cage, because all of my life I've been interested in martial arts, but I've never really tested myself. And I'm not a violent person, but I love the idea of putting myself into situations where I get to rise above my fears and press through. So I did that, got to 260 pounds. I then supported a friend. I was his cornerman for his first fight, or his first fight in the cage in London. And then I said to myself, well, you know what, before I get too old, I'm going to give this a crack. And in the span of 8 months at that particular organization, I got the heavyweight title for heavyweight for England. So that it was cool for that organization. So and once I had achieved that, I thought, well, I'm done. I'm out. And because there's other business that goes on there. There's within the fighting scene, within any of the sports, there's always some sort of bit of that stuff. And my wife said to me she didn't want me involved in any of that nonsense, so I pulled the card on that and decided to take other avenues.
I mean, to take up martial arts and actually get into the ring, it takes a certain mentality to do that. I mean, most people, when they challenge themselves, they're going to try some new funky food or something. They're going to eat insects for the first time, or maybe travel to a different country. So, I mean, was that part? Did you is that part of the Polynesian culture? This kind of the warrior spirit, or I mean, why didn't you take up baking?
Well, I do like a bit of baking. But But okay, that in particular, I think it always stemmed back to my childhood, and my brothers were involved in gangs and fighting and all that kind of stuff, and I got separated from them at a young age, and so I was brought up solo, adopted out. But I always had this thing within me. I'm not sure if it's Polynesian culture. That we do draw to the sportsmanship, to the performing arts. We're wired that way. We could say it's the warrior spirit, but for me in particular, it was just something that I felt I had to do. And what really inspired me was watching a documentary on Mike Tyson. And if you hear Mike Tyson speak nowadays, he often refers back to not actually enjoying the fight and not actually being a violent person. But they created a monster there, and he was just really, really good at his job. And you know, he tells stories. Refers back to, you know, throwing up before he went into a fight, being completely scared, shitless. You know, that he was going to go into face this other man. But as he got closer to being in the ring, a sort of confidence came upon him, and then he switched persona. And so for me, it was that inspired me to hear that someone like Mike Tyson was afraid. I thought, well, I'd always been afraid. I'd always been too scared to match myself up against someone in a ring or in a cage, because it meant that once the bell had gone, that was it. It was mano y mano. You're standing opposite, and one of you is going to come out the victim, one of you isn't. So uh, the mentality for that, I still couldn't switch on the aggression because it just wasn't wired that way. So that my nickname was Herb the Love Bug. So it just, so you know, I couldn't change persona. I couldn't pretend to be angry at the person. I couldn't, you know, I didn't really intentionally want to hurt them. And it, but that being said, I completed that, and I got that out of my system mostly. And it was actually the training. It was the training that I appreciated the most. It wasn't, even though I wanted to be matched up, I knew that if, just to go into that, to train and to train hard and then to test yourself. I think there's something very,
Yes.
that men love to do that. It may not even be the competitive thing, because I don't find myself too competitive, but my own challenge is always against myself, and it's coming against my own demons, coming against my own thought processes and the things that hold me back, and that tends to be me. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I, I decided that I took that journey, I passed that journey, and I've moved past that journey now. But I'm still, you know, I still love the sport.
Do you still train? I know when I was out there, you were getting back into at least the training, not necessarily not the fighting side. So I mean, what's your regime like now then?
Okay, so I did a bit of powerlifting, and I have my own gym at the house. So I still lift, um, but again, I think because with seasons, and for me personally, if I don't have a goal, I won't approach anything that I do with the full intensity, with the
And
full,
focus.
yeah, with the full investment. So I won't fully invest myself. So I'm still, I've put the lifting down for a while, because also I found that when I was powerlifting, I started to get a bit wider, and I had to struggle with a bit of sleep apnea.
Right.
So
Okay.
because I was lifting some heavy weights for me, non-drugged, and yeah, it was beginning to play a toll on my sleeping pattern. So I decided to give that a rest, and I've started returning back to fight training with one of my Sikh brothers, and we're getting back involved again. So that's where my training's at the moment.
So before we get into the full topic of masculinity, just like what is another side project that you are focused on before we start getting into it?
Oh, man, I think we've all got our hustle on, or at least we're trying
Yeah,
to have a
yeah.
hustle. So at the moment, I'm as far as a creative flow. I've joined up with two other Polynesians here in the UK. We've named ourselves Brown Boy. So it's music.
Excellent.
It's not. We can't quite find a genre for it, and I don't think we really want to. But it's quite uplifting music, and it has a Polynesian flair to it. It's still quite mainstream, And so we're working towards getting that up and running and moving, and trying not to take the routes that everybody takes in society today. We're not looking for shortcuts. We're looking for validity in the quality of our music. We're looking for merit. You know, that we've earned this position. So that's what we're working on. Been working on it for the last year. We will be releasing a couple of singles this year. So we're just doing some finer touch-ups, and then that will be good. But yeah, you can find us online on Facebook, Brown Boy Music with the one, and that's on Facebook. Yeah, so come and find us and check us out.
I'll definitely be putting links to all of your music.
Cheers,
And
bro.
yeah, of course, man. I mean, we all in this together, you know. I'm all about having a community that supports other guys and stuff like that.
Good looking out,
Um,
brother.
yeah, of course. I just want to touch briefly because the main topic that I think I want to get into is the issue of masculinity. And I mean, it's a complicated subject. It seems to be under attack this
Very
day and
much.
age. You know, we just had the advertisement come out from Gillette. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. I mean, so I mean, let's start with, you know, what does masculinity mean to you, and where do you think you got that definition of masculinity?
As you said, it's quite a varied topic, and
Yes.
it's also quite a hot topic because people have their own ideas. Now, my personal idea, I would probably fall into a category of being quite traditional, um, though that idea wasn't actually modeled to me because I grew up in a single mother family. The idea of a father, a mother, children, that whole family unit wasn't actually modeled to me. So if it was modeled to me, it was by other people's families. And so masculinity, I probably struggled with the idea of masculinity through my teenage years, and kind of only came into the concept or the idea a little bit more solidified once I had my own children.
Right. Yes.
Because I, I've been working with kids as a youth worker in schools internationally for over 20 years now. And there was a underlining tone, or um, there was a common factor within all the kids that I worked with, that they were struggling, and it was that they were missing a dad.
Right.
So my story kind of resonated with all of them who I got in touch with, and who I came into touch with. So I realized that the man in the home was quite an important thing, because I could see it reflected in the way that people behaved, including myself. My behavior and the way that I saw the world without a father um, was actually quite negative, and there were ways that I was seeking a masculine approach, or a masculine example, and I would do that in a negative way by finding it through negative things,
Right.
negative expressions. So the way that I discovered, or my idea of what masculinity is, and of course these ideas can change, is from having my own kids and not wanting them to grow up without a father, not wanting them to grow up without someone who is present, who cares, who can. I wanted to be the thing that they never had, or that I never had.
You had
Yeah,
never
I wanted
had.
to be the thing I never had, and so that's where I've got my ideas from. Yeah, and it's shown in my children. And I don't say this egotistically, but my children are very well balanced individuals. They're highly intelligent. They're emotionally becoming intelligent as well. They just seem to be very aligned, and they don't have the hang-ups that I had growing up, and they don't look anything like the kids who I work with look like, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I mean, you touched on. I didn't. I don't want. You don't have to get very personal about this.
Fine, I'm
Um,
fine. You know me.
but I mean, you and I share a story where basically our dads were absent in the capacity. Um, I mean, even though my dad was with me until I was 12, I didn't have like a conversation with him until I was 18. So he was pretty much a stranger in a lot of
Sure.
ways. And but you mentioned that you saw it in other people, maybe in other families and stuff. Could you give an example of like what you saw that maybe resonated with you?
Yeah, well, I saw that. I hate to use this as an example, but I think as humans, we sometimes, especially when we're growing up, we compare our lives or we compare ideas. And so I would see people who had their life together a bit better than I did, or than others around me in my neighborhood, were those who had their mother and father together.
Right.
There seemed to be just this better alignment. And those people who I grew up with and grew around seemed to have uh, a more balanced point of view on life. It didn't lean so hard towards one way or the other, um, unless their parents were very strong ideaed and they were following in those. But it just seemed, at least from my perspective growing up, that their lives, those who had their lives better, um, just seemed more balanced with two people together, working together, and their family unit was together. And so I took that and I thought, well, I will run with that, and I'll make that happen in my own life, so that my kids, and the proof's in the pudding for me personally, because my kids
Yeah.
are very well balanced individuals, and I don't enforce any of my outlook on life to them, and I suggest more than I do anything, and we have conversations. And that's also something that I never had with growing up with my mother, just my mum. I definitely lived a life of do as I say, not as I do. And she actually told me
Right.
that, do as I say, not as I do. And I went, okay. So that was my example. Um, and I decided also that I would implement having conversations with my kids, not necessarily taking things away, but bringing things in. And my role modeling is okay. Here's an example of role modeling, right? So we often, I guess, we tell our kids, be kind. Be kind to that person. Be kind. Do this. Do that. And I, from an early age, from when they could understand, I gave my kids permission to pull me up.
Right.
So if I would ask them to do something and they didn't see me modeling it, then they were more than allowed to come and pull me up on that matter. So I didn't want to show myself to be a hypocrite to my kids. So if I'm asking them to do something, then I should be willing to do the thing as well. So,
Right.
and if like, and for example, my wife and I were driving in the car. We had the boys in the back. My youngest was 2 at the time. So we're driving in the car, and my wife and I have a heated discussion. Not quite an argument, but a heated discussion. And in the heat of the moment, both of us were raising our voices. So like I'm raising my voice to my wife, she's raising her voice to me, and we don't argue in front of the kids generally. But at that moment in time, we lost ourselves. We got involved in that conversation, and my 2-year-old goes, "Daddy, stop it!" And so I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Don't talk to mummy like that. Apologize." And I went, "What?"
Wow.
And he shut me down.
Right.
Shut me down because he saw that there was the balance was out. And so I went, "Do you know what? I'm sorry, son." And then I apologized to his mother, and she looked at me and smirked. And then he goes, "Mummy, don't talk to daddy like that. Apologize."
Brilliant.
And so he pulled balance back in, because that's what he's seen. Like when him and his brother would get into it, it's like, whoa, 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 stop. You two apologize to each other, make things right. But he's modeling, and he's allowed to model, and he's allowed to pull me. So if I'm asking him to do something, that's why I don't ask. I know that here's a weird one. I don't ask my kids to share,
Right.
because I think that's weird. Because I don't like to share. No, being serious. Like, okay, right, share half your cookie with this little boy over there. Why should he share his half a cookie? Just eat your damn cookie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you want to share, then it's your choice to share. And I can suggest that you share because it's kind, and that person will appreciate you sharing. But I'm not going to say, "Oh, look, they're crying. Give them half your cookie." No, don't give them half your cookie.
Brilliant.
Make your
Brilliant.
choice. Make your choice.
I mean, I could attest to. I mean, as I say, I stayed with Herb for a while, and his kids are great. I do miss them. Give them my best when you see them after this. Yeah. So I mean, going back to this concept of masculinity. I mean, you are probably one of the most masculine men that I know,
What
right?
does it even mean? What does it mean to
I mean, like, okay, I take after the Jack Donovan definition of
Okay.
masculinity, right? So he wrote the book, The Ways of Men, um, the Becoming the Barbarian, like a really strong masculine kind of role model. I think he might actually be New Zealand. He might be a
Oh,
Kiwi.
really?
I'll
Never
have
heard
to
of
I'll have to check that. But he defined masculinity in the ways of the tribe, in terms of the hunter gatherers, and he would
it.
take
Okay.
it back to the tribe.
Sure.
And he says that to be a man means, one, to be strong. And I was there with you, and you were, doing the powerlifting in the cold, and all this kind of stuff. So you definitely encapsulated that. A man also has to have honor in the tribe. He has to be respected amongst men, right? And I mean, I was with you in some of your church gatherings and all of these other things, and you commanded that like a boss.
Oh,
It was fantastic. It was really great. And you've also got to have competence, meaning like if you're in the tribe, you got to be a good hunter, you got to be whatever, right? A fisherman and stuff. You got to
sure.
contribute to the tribe. And I watched you do that for your family. For the church, when they'd call you up in the morning to go and play the drums or whatever the case is, you were present. Even your faith experiments that you did in the church, that you just did it. You just did it. I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but
Sure, sure, sure.
and those are the major encapsulations of manliness, and it could be summed up with responsibility.
Right.
It could all be summed up by taking responsibility. And
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, for me, it's a very recent discovery. I'm sure for even like you and stuff like that. So I've always seen it, but I've never seen it laid out like that per se,
Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
right? So, I mean, how would you say, like, what are you teaching your sons? Like, because you got two sons,
Sure.
how are you defining them as men? What kind of men do you want them to be?
Well, I think just those 3 points that you listed are actually ring quite true. I've never actually heard those before, and so I think strength looks different to everybody. In today's society, strength also looks very different to uh, what I was taught strength looked like. Um,
Could you touch on that? Like, what were you
uh,
taught versus what we see today?
okay, so growing up without a man in my house,
Without okay,
but growing up without a man in my house, strength looked like showing no emotion. It looked like um, there was taking responsibility for what you do. Strength looked like being on time for everything, um, making a commitment and keeping your word. Uh, those are just some of the things that my mother taught me about strength. Um, Strength was also standing up for yourself. Um, but there was also, there was also the other side of it. If eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, that was also strength.
mm-hmm.
But that today, of course, my ideas have changed. So strength in some of those things, strength for me looks like being able to be brutally who you are,
Very
recklessly,
true. Yes,
recklessly who you are, and without. It's quite, what, it's very close to an existential point of view of
yes,
freedom and being you. So I take part of that. I don't fully align up to the whole meaning of existentialism and that philosophy, but the the being the genuine you, um, I think that's very strong because it's you standing, it's making your line in the sand, it's hanging your flag, it's declaring this is who I am right now. It doesn't declare who I'm going to stay. I am who
correct.
I am, but I'm not going to stay like this. I'm allowed to change my mind. I'm allowed to change the way that I stand, and I'm allowed to change, you know. But it's, you know, um, it's for my kids. As I was saying before about being emotionally intelligent, I was never taught to cry, and so this year and last year has been a very big journey for me because I've been engaging in a lot of the things that I had suppressed and had been what's the word? I'd swept under the carpet basically,
Yeah,
and I
you're
thought,
disconnected from.
yeah, I thought I dealt with it,
Right.
but there have been certain triggers that have happened last year that have set off those things and have helped them arise to, like grief being one of them. And here's a conundrum. So I'm on my mother's deathbed. I turn up to the hospital. She didn't even tell me she was dying because she didn't want to
Wow.
burden me. So we turn up to the hospital. I thought I was just visiting. We turn up to the hospital. I walk in and I see this shell of a woman that I didn't know, and it was my mother. So I'm just like, why didn't you tell me you're dying? And she said, well, I didn't want to bother you. You're married now. I've done my job. You do your thing.
Right.
And so now, at that moment, my grief hits me, and I turn to tears. And the first thing that comes out of her mouth is, "Don't cry. Be strong."
Right.
Now, what that did to me was that caused me, after she died, which was about 2 weeks after that, what that did to me though was that statement caused me 6 months worth of harm because emotionally I couldn't deal with the grief
Right.
because her words rung in my ear were don't cry, be strong. Whereas I wanted to cry because I was grieving the loss of someone who I loved. And the ability to work out that emotion, I didn't know what to do with that. And so it took 6 months, and I actually went into a place of depression because I didn't understand what I actually wanted to feel.
Right.
I
Yeah.
felt, I felt joy that she was no longer in pain. I felt pain because she was no longer with me. I felt grief because I'd lost the greatest woman that I knew in this world, and I didn't know how to deal with those emotions because I wasn't taught how to. So that was a conundrum and a half. Um, but yeah, so with my boys, I want them to experience emotions. So we will watch movies together, and I will purposely allow myself to cry,
Right.
and I try to catch them out because it's funny watching boys watch movies, and when there's something that hits them emotionally, that they're like this, oh, oh, there's dust in the room, or oh, it's just because I yawned. I'm like, and so I'll catch my eldest particularly, and I go, oh, that was pretty sad, wasn't it? And he went, like I could see that he was trying to hold back. And I'm saying, but look, Daddy's crying because you're allowed to cry. There's nothing wrong with crying. I think it's an expression that we're allowed to have as men, but we've never been taught how to use it as men,
I
and we've
agree.
never been taught how to grieve or how to feel in the moment and just show that emotion. So I try to teach my boys that. I try to teach them. Um, yeah, I just try to lead by example, bro. I think that's the thing.
Yeah, yeah, I know that's a big part of it, and I mean, I don't want to get you in trouble with the authorities, but you do a little rough housing with your boys sometimes.
I don't think you know what my boys are close to me because we do rough each other up. We
Yeah,
do wrestle.
very
We do.
playful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We
yeah.
do wrestle. Um, at a young age, like I didn't have a dad to show me how to carry your kids when they were babies. So I watched the Discovery Channel and watched how gorillas carry their babies. I'll do it that way. And do you know what? There is something that we can learn from the animal kingdom. We place ourselves above humanity. Humans just place ourselves above all the other sentient beings that live around. We think we're just so freaking we know it all. But mate, that gorillas, all that kind of stuff. So when we're roughing up, I never had anyone to put me on their shoulders to buy my first car or to wrestle. And I always wanted to wrestle, like wrestle around with someone. I didn't have the older brothers around to wrestle with. And my boys wrestle, and I wrestle with my boys. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think if you watch the animal kingdom, you watch lions.
Yeah.
Lions rough each other up all the time, and then they give each other a nip, when they're getting too out of hand. So like the dad lion will just sit there and be lazy and like fall asleep, and all the other lions are trying to play around him and knock him about. And do you know what I mean? I
Oh yeah,
think
totally, totally. I
I
think
think
I think you were probably one of the best examples that I saw of that kind of rough housing. And
wow.
you speak from experience that your boys are well balanced. They handle it. It's not abusive or anything like that. It's picking them up, throwing them on the couch, and
Yeah, well, I don't think it's from a young age, I'd always wanted me personally to be lifted. It's a wonderful feeling to be held in the hands of someone and be lifted.
yeah,
If you think about it, if you imagine that, just that feeling of being as a child, just letting go. and just being lifted up. You're weightless, and you know, it's an amazing feeling. And I could only ever get that feeling on a roller coaster. So
Yeah, yeah, that's a good example.
why don't I just, I'll pick my kids up, because your kids come running to you with their hands up in the air, and when you lift them up, they just, they're elated. They have this, daddy's got me. There's that
Yeah,
connection, and it's, for me, that's strength, because they want to see dad's strength. Dad can pick me up. Dad can pick us both up at the same time. Dad can handle both of us attacking him. Dad can, you know, my daddy's. And so when my kids would have nightmares or night terrors or whatever the hell they want to call them, the first conversation I would have with them would be, "Who's the strongest?" And they went, "You are, Daddy." I said, "That's right. So if anything comes back, nothing can harm you. Why can't it, Daddy? Because Daddy will eat it. Daddy will crush it. Nothing can touch you because Daddy's here." And that
that's
gives them such a security and sleep. So, you know, I think that's them knowing that their daddy's the strongest. I think
right.
every kid wants to know that their daddy's the strongest, but it's
Everybody
not
wants a
about.
superhero dad, you know?
It's not being the strongest in the neighborhood, or like having to punch everyone. And no, it's that kid needs to know he's so secure that his daddy's the strongest and will take care of him.
Anything. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, that's a fantastic way to put it. And as I think we'd both agree, it's been lacking, especially, I mean, obviously the wider culture is not necessarily on board with that type of masculinity.
No.
Um, and you must encounter it in the school and with, these different places. So, I mean, do you speak a little bit about what is being pushed as masculinity now versus what, you hold as masculinity?
It's a strange thing, and funnily enough, one of the neighbors who moved in recently had a big dispute with the two other neighbors, and so the police were called because there was a lot of threats being thrown around verbally, whatnot. And while that was taking place, I ended up having to have a good conversation with the local sergeant who had come to the aid of whatever was going on. And he goes, "You know what? I retire in a year." And he goes, "The we started talking about, you know um, masculinity. It's just strange the conversations that come out."
Amazing.
And he said, even in the police are seen as quite a, you could see the police or the forces or anything as quite a patriarchal shell of it, of what it looks like.
Right.
And he used it, which was great. He used the authority without being a jerk. You could just tell that
Right.
he had presence.
Oh, have we lost you there, Herbie? It's has the connection died out? Oh, I think we may have lost Herbie for a second there. Herbie, there?
I'm
Can you
here.
hear me?
I'm still here. I can hear you.
The connection
But he
went dead
was,
for a second there, bro. But yeah,
hey,
you were saying
no
about
worries.
he was authoritative without being abusing the power. You were just saying that story.
Absolutely. He just had presence. He had presence of character, presence of mind. And if anyone else who was a younger male cop had come to that situation, he would have nicked the person straight away. But because he's got experience and he had presence of mind and he knew exactly what was going on, no one got nicked. No one got arrested that day. And no one needed to get arrested because the argument was between a male and a female.
Right.
And the female was the one who called the cops. And in today's society, he would have got nicked. But thankfully, we had him, this older sergeant, come across who could see the whole situation, who could have a wider perspective of what was going on, and not just take it at face value that that she made the accusation that he said that he was going to do something. But when I was there and I heard the whole conversation, and both of them were threatening each other, so
Right.
we he took into account that six half a dozen. It
Yeah.
wasn't just, don't
It
just
wasn't
take
one
the
sided.
woman because he's making threats. They were both as bad as each other. So what we end up going back to my point, what we end up having a conversation about is that our lines of work have changed a lot in the last 5 to 10 years. Um, when I first started out working with young people, it was very much them needing guidance and needing a very strong male figure to model. It's now it's now turned into a very, very soppy soup of things, and there are certain ideas and agendas that seem to be pushing. I don't want to take away nurturing, but it just seems like everything's moving towards the nurturing. Everything moves towards every child matters, but we seem to forget about what about the teachers? What about the adults that work with the balance is shifted so far one way that that these young kids can make accusations and they believe the kid straight away without having any data or any proof. Whereas before it was, I trust my team, I've hired them for this reason. Let's, we can work this out.
Right.
But now it's you take the kid at their word. It's a very odd thing. But as I was talking to this cop, he said that that industry has changed as well, and they're very wired towards a very, I don't want to say feminine approach, but a very feminist approach.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's no longer, it's just, if you're male, you're guilty, and if you're a
Right.
white male, you're guilty.
Right.
Or if a child makes an accusation, you're guilty, and until you're proven innocent. It's a really weird thing that's going on. So yeah.
I mean that we've seen that. I mean, it's definitely more prevalent in the U.S. I know it is creeping in to the UK where we both are. And yeah, it's this whole identity politics thing, and depending on like your race, your identity, your sexual orientation, that will determine how right you are for some reason, right?
Yep.
And that I mean, obviously, that's never been how society has gauged truth. We've always demanded, innocent until proven guilty.
Yep. We
Because
got the
we've
data, we
seen,
got the proof. You know what I mean? It's not that anymore.
yeah. I mean, we've seen the reverse. We've seen guilty until proven innocent, and that's where people just go in and you get Salem witch trials, right? It's like, we're
Yep.
going to burn you at the stake, or we're going to drown you, and if you
If
survive, you're a witch. And
you're not a witch.
exactly. Right. And that's the reason. I mean, that precedent, habeas corpus is so huge. I know you're seeing this. So we call it gynocentrism or feminine primacy,
Yep.
where right now masculinity is being labeled almost as a mental disorder.
Sure.
Right. I'm sure you've seen the American I think it's Psychology or Psychiatric Association, the APA,
Right.
has classified masculinity as a mental disease. Right. This is, I don't know
Then
if you
again,
see
how do they define what their masculinity, what they're talking about? What you know what I
it.
mean?
Well, this is exactly the point, right? So it's completely subjective. And I mean, this is what's now produced things like the Gillette ad, right? So it's the whole Me Too, it's the the mansplaining, and it's feminine. It's almost feminist propaganda
Yeah.
being pushed in the realms of mental health,
Sure.
which is dangerous, if
Yeah.
you ask me.
I guess it's the same. It's the same how many people would think that the whole, as you talked about the gender identity type stuff, many would class that as mental health.
Yeah,
So maybe it's a pushback in the opposite direction of, you know what I'm saying?
yeah. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. It's an odd thing, man. This whole thing is just, so we've. I think there's a thing that's being put around at the moment, especially in Kent, um, for anti-bullying towards, I think it was HBT, so homophobic, biphobic, transphobic.
Right.
So um, now I believe personally no one should be bullied. Don't give a
Agreed.
damn what's going on, and I also believe that everything is individual. But what seems to be happening is instead of individualizing everything, it seems to be growing its own particular culture. It's like its own, yeah, its own identity. This and it just seems that like common sense is thrown out. Any data or statistics seem really odd to me. I struggle with the statistics. So this person who came and spoke to us talked about, I think it was something like 48% of um, LGBTQ, KFC, LMNOP, all the
Yeah.
letters. Um, they 48% of them have either tried to harm themselves, kill themselves, etc. And so for me, the statistics in it, I was like, but like how many, what numbers are we working with here? What was your base number? Who did the? I was struggling with because as someone who wasn't LGBTQ, as a teenager going through my teenage years, I had tried to harm myself. Do you know
Right.
what I mean?
As did I.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just seemed like it's not uncommon amongst teenagers because we're doing it. So I'd say probably 48% of, I could say 48% of all humans have wanted to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, completely agree.
I struggle with the statistics. It's yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that whole thing's, and I went to two of the courses that they put on concerning the HBT, and I just don't want anyone bullied. I don't care. And
Correct.
again, individual. I think everything needs to be looked at individually. But it just seems like those with the loudest voices are the ones that are heard.
Yeah.
And so it's those who hold a traditional point of view or conservative point of view, or because I'm quite a liberal traditionalist, I
Sure.
think.
Of course. I know what you mean.
And but my voice isn't that loud
Right.
because it's the common thing. And it seems now that the thing that's more common, that has the most numbers with it, is now the obscure thing. It's just really weird.
No, it really is. It really is. Like, many times I think, am I losing my mind? Like, how is any of this stuff passed? Now I understand the internet. Like a lot of media is dying, right?
Of
Traditional
course.
media is dying. So people are canceling in the UK. They're canceling their BBC licenses. They don't want to watch a lot of that kind of propaganda. Newspapers are dying. It's all on the internet now and this kind of stuff. So I understand they need to run sensational stories to get clicks,
Yeah.
to make revenue, right? So the,
Yeah.
the more crazy, ideas out there, ban all meat, kill all men, that's going to get, prime time on BuzzFeed or whatever it is, right? But I don't think that represents the majority. Like you said, I think that's the loudest voice. It's what they're promoting because that's what gets them the clicks to get the ad revenue.
Yeah.
But I don't think most people actually believe this garbage.
Yeah.
Right. Now, there are not enough people like yourself, myself, and others who are we need to speak out
Sure.
against
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah.
because right now, that voice, that progressive voice, or regressive,
Yeah.
it's really like we're going backwards. It's the loudest.
Yeah.
Right. And as you say, sometimes they're making shit up out of absolutely nothing. Right. Like the famous pay gap, right? The gender pay gap,
Right. Right. Right.
which has been debunked repeatedly, and
But no one wants to listen to the data.
they don't actually want to look at the data. And I mean, you
No.
can get data to support anything. It's really,
And that's what I mean. That's what I mean as
yeah,
well. Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
there's also common sense. Like
correct,
if someone makes a common sense statement and you think actually that's quite common sense,
yeah,
people are still more willing to believe the sensationalized stuff. Not always, but it
yeah,
just seems because it's there. It's at the forefront of everything. You're just like, oh, what about that? You almost it causes a dilemma,
yeah.
a dichotomy.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, dissidence. You're just like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. Even though you don't fully agree with what's being pushed, it's almost like you have to. I'm like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I deal with those conversations all the time, and many times I just don't even have the conversation because I know I'm not dealing with somebody who I can have a rational conversation with. I'm dealing with somebody who is basically a zealot, right? They're the new Calvinist, as I think Jordan Peterson might have coined the phrase. They're not really interested in having a dialogue. They are the God's chosen, and they're come to convert you, the dog, right?
you got it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That is
because about 5 years ago, atheism went through this kind of idea,
that's right.
and they were pushing their agenda to, we had the whole strong points from Richard Dawkins. Everything on social media was about Richard Dawkins. Richard
Yes.
Dawkins, this, that, and the other. And he got to push a lot of his agenda, and this whole free thinking and whatnot. I'm just like, it still wasn't the common, it wasn't the majority. It's
No, correct. And as you say, it's just the loudest voices. It's just the loud. But what I'm concerned about is somehow this is becoming policy. Like you're discussing something that's going through the schools, and I completely agree. The bullying thing is terrible, and I believe you should raise awareness. I am a little concerned about kind of cherry picking certain statistics to signal
yeah,
out a particular group and say, well, they need extra protection.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
How about we just protect the kids? like
Yep.
all kids, right?
How about we protect everybody?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And we look out for, but this group mentality and this kind of clustering of, well, these people are, they're equal but extra equal kind of thing, I think is dangerous.
Yeah, and I made a few of those points at these meetings, and I was quite honest with where I was thinking, and where my struggles were with what was being shared. What was really good though is that the people who attended, which was there was about 70 of us there, that what it actually showed me is that the majority, um, everyone cared because no one wants anyone bullied, but the majority sat very center. So they didn't sit progressive regressive. They
Right.
sat very center, and they wanted to know more. They wanted to, which was actually quite
Correct.
encouraging, because to have all of our staff sit there and not be just pro, okay, this is our next thing, we're going to run with it. It was like everyone was like, well, I'm really unsure. And that for me is a positive,
That is a
because it
positive.
shows that people are thinking.
Correct. Correct. And that, I mean, that's a very rare thing. And what we're seeing, especially in the US with the universities, what I think the big thing was Title IX, which was basically the removal of guilty until proven innocent when it comes to college rape
Mm,
cases. So, whoever reported the rape first wins, basically,
yeah,
right? And anyway, that of course was detrimental. Many of the male students, they sued the university for unjust, expulsion and these other things, and there was a huge backlash. And now they have to reverse and go back to due process and be like, no, you've got to prove these things.
thank
So
God for due process.
yeah, I mean, where would we be if we didn't have that, right? And this is, I mean, what you sharing that a story about what some of the staff and stuff like that. Obviously, they're thinking about it.
Hmm.
And we know some schools haven't, and they've jumped headfirst into a lot of these types of policies.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be a pushback. I mean, I don't know
Well,
when.
I hope so. I hope that
Yeah,
here's my thing, is to each their own. Do your damn thing. Do whatever you want to do.
agreed.
I don't care. But at least at the bare minimum, if I allow you to criticize me and my belief system and where I am, you should also be allowed, you allow me to criticize you. So
Correct.
I shouldn't have to agree with you, but it doesn't mean I don't love you.
Exactly.
It should, I hope that I'm getting better at allowing people to criticize my belief system. I
Yeah,
hope that I can sit down and have dialogue with people where, where I can learn. But what seems to be the thing is that when if people disagree with my belief in God and my stand, and I look at Chris Pratt, Star Lord.
right. Yeah, yeah.
So there was a write up on him recently. He sent out a Twitter about, he's into God. Okay,
Yes.
do your thing, and then people there were criticizing the fact that he had a belief in God. I'm
Right.
like, well, criticize it, whatever. Let him do his thing. If it's the same breath, if someone comes out and has a trans moment, or do your thing, and just if unfortunately social media is not really the place where you can have the dialogue.
Agreed.
It's,
Agreed.
everyone gets to point fingers and throw fruit at each other. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. The
Throw
bomb
tomatoes.
throwers come out, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah. You
disaster.
get to walk away. But with the people that I know who have, I know two in my life that have struggled with the whole trans thing, and for them individually, if they're not hurting themselves, if they're not in a place of pain, do your thing.
I agree. I
Do
agree.
your thing. If you're not harming anyone else, do your thing. I'm quite liberal like that. But similarly, I don't like anyone pushing their religion on me. I'd never do that to anyone else. I don't like anyone pushing their belief system on me. I wouldn't do that to anyone else. If you don't like my belief system, don't follow it. I don't care. But this is me. Let me do me. I'll let you do you. And then we can be kind to each other. Let's just kind of get on. If you feel like criticizing me, cool. Let me sit down and have a talk with you. Let me criticize you if I have any
Correct.
criticisms about it. We just don't seem to have the maturity. Like, okay, just to add to this, when you talk about masculinity, I'm teaching my boys how to argue.
Good.
Now, when I tell people that, they like, why are you teaching them to argue? Why shouldn't you teach them to debate? I'm saying it's a play on words, semantics. I'm teaching my boys to argue. So they're getting to a stage now where they have a point of view. And if they have a point of view and they've got the data to back it up and they've got the passion and they want this particular thing to happen, then have an argument with me. It's a positive thing. So I say to them, right, it's bedtime, 6 p.m., go to bed. Done, you need rest, you got school tomorrow. But Dad, I wanted to watch the rest of my movie. Okay, what time does your movie finish? 7:30. Okay, are you going to have enough sleep? Yeah, yeah. And if he can give me a solid foundational
Reason.
argument,
Yeah.
reason, and he can reason with me, I've got no problem allowing him to stay up for another hour. Do your thing. But if you, and like I said, you'll probably lose most of your battles, son, with me because I'll argue you. But I want you to argue with me. So, and yesterday he was sitting at the table and he goes, um, what did he do? He did something unkind to his brother. Okay.
It's a good way to put this.
Yeah. So we made them pizza for dinner, and he did the whole push your head into the cake thing. He pushed his brother's head into the pizza. Funny, but the pizza was really hot. So
Okay.
his brother's crying, tears are streaming down his face. He's got tomato paste and everything all up in his eyes and whatnot. So I send him up to his room, and then I clean up my other son. I said, "You okay? You hurt? Da da da. No, I'm good." Sat down, eat your dinner. 5 minutes later, I went up and I had the conversation with my son. I'm like, um, at what stage do you think that was a good idea?
Mhm.
I don't know. Okay. So were you just trying to be funny? Were you trying to have a laugh? Yeah, I was. But I just at the moment in time, I thought it'd be good just to bang his head into the thing. I said, okay. I said, well, one, it's hot. Yes, you didn't think any of that through. None of that you thought through. Anyway, we ended up having our discussion. He came down. I brought him back downstairs after 5 minutes. I said, now what you need to do is you need to check up on your brother and see if he's okay, and make things right. Take
Yes.
responsibility for your actions. Make it right. And so he spent some time trying to make it right. And I said, dude, what are you doing? Because he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then I'm like, dude, think about what you did. Take responsibility for your actions. You almost hurt your brother. You could have scolded him.
Mhm.
Look at what happened. Look at the consequences. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, so then he made things right. His brother was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. They're happy-go-lucky. They're sitting there eating their dinner. So another 5 minutes has gone by. They've made it right. And I sat down at the table with my dinner. And I went, and my first conversation was, so son, how did you feel that Daddy handled that situation?
Right.
And he went, I'm unsure. And I went, okay. I said, so how would you have handled that situation? And as he rolled it through, he goes, actually, Dad, I would have handled it like you. I said,
Amazing.
in I said, there's two choices that I could have made. I could have gone old school, how my mum used to do it, and just beat your ass.
Right.
That could have been the first approach. But I chose to take approach like this. This is how I choose to approach you, so that you can think about things. And he goes, his exact words were, thank you, Dad. The way that you handled that was good because you reasoned with me. I'm like,
Amazing.
8 year old, and he gets it. He's starting to get it. So I that strength would have been when I was growing up, beating your kids because I got the
Right.
hell beating all the time.
Yeah.
Strength for me to is to be able to process it, process the emotions, walk through the pain,
Right.
face the thing that's right in front of you, walk through it, take responsibility. If it hurts, eat some humble pie. And that's me trying to teach my kids how to be strong.
No, I think that is spot on. I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, and we were discussing the roles of mothers and fathers in raising kids, and we kind of summed it up this way in a sense that the mother's role is definitely the first love and the nurturer of the
Yeah,
child.
yeah,
And the example of that is, okay, the child wants to go on the swing, mommy will pick up the child, put the child on the swing, and push the swing. Child comes to the dad's job is to push the limits of the child.
absolutely.
So the child wants to get on the swing, the dad will say, well, get on it. And he'll show the child how to get on the swing. Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the father's role in many ways is teaching him which rules to break, which rules not to break, and how this society
It's
works.
really good. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you're describing to me is it resonates with me because I wish people actually knew how to reason and wish they knew how to argue.
It's okay to be wrong.
I mean, but I mean, you must get it in the schools all the time. The kind of nonsense kids try to say.
Yeah, but and with them as well. Like so, um, I've told them like this is what, and again with confidence, the reason that the kids respect me where I work is because I treat them how I treat my own kids.
Right.
I've told them that, and that's why they respect me because I reason with them. I'm like, have you thought of this? You know what I mean? Um, just to add to that, I want to tell one more story because you got me on.
Okay, go ahead, man.
My 8-year-old um, had tried for 4 years to get onto the school council. So each year group they get the school council person. They have their meetings. Then they get to change things that go on in the school and whatnot. It's for me it's not it's like okay whatever. But for 4 years he'd been trying to do it, and each year he was told he could vote for himself and then for another person. And for all 4 years he never voted for himself. He always voted for someone else.
Right.
Not because he never told me this. He only told me this year. Like I didn't know that he was doing this, but he just told me what he was doing. I was like, okay, wow, that's amazing. So I said, for none of those times you voted for yourself. He goes, no, I voted for someone else every time. This year, 100% of the votes got voted for him, and he still
Amazing.
didn't vote for himself. He still voted for someone else.
Amazing.
So he won his uh, school council, and he's so proud of that badge that he wears and that honor. That's another thing I think what comes with
Yes.
masculinity is the honor.
Honor.
So
Yeah.
he was honored to have that position, and he earned that position.
Yeah. From the
Anyway,
respect of his peers.
he came home one week, and him and the neighbor, the kid next door, were having a disagreement. And he, as his mother tells the story, he took his badge off, he threw it on the ground, and he goes, "Fuck you," because she had called him fat or something.
Really?
But he
Okay.
disengaged from. Sorry, bro, someone's trying to call. He disengaged from the honor of having that badge because he
He
threw it on
removed
the ground.
it.
He removed it. He distanced himself from what he held as
The
the
position of honor.
yep his honor, and then he degraded himself in order to deliver his message.
Amazing.
And for me, that was amazing. This is an 8-year-old. Never taught him this stuff. This is who
Right.
he is. So mum sends him up to his room. Wait till your dad gets home. Okay. So I get in the door from work. She tells me the story. I kind of giggle because I think it's quite funny.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, I'll go and have a chat with him now. So I go upstairs and we're sitting there. And I'm like, okay, son, tell me what's going on. Why are you up here? And he stood in front of me. He goes, well, I said a bad word to the neighbor. And I went, okay, what's the bad word? And he goes, I said the F word. And I could clearly see that he was uncomfortable with the conversation.
Yeah.
He said, I said the F word. And then tears started to stream from his face. I said, what's the F word? Like I'm pushing, like I
Yeah.
would
Own
never
it.
be allowed to say this in front of my parents. Like,
Right. Yeah.
or in front of my mum. I've never been able to speak this language ever,
Right.
let alone tut. But he goes, I said fuck.
Right.
And so, and now he's bawling, he's in tears because he felt the dishonor,
That is right.
yeah, of what had happened and where he was. And then I held his hands and I went, son, I love you. You're allowed to have that language, but not right now
Correct.
because you're not ready for that language. You're not ready to understand the passion and everything that comes along with that language. I said, all language is yours, whether it's dark, whether it's light, it doesn't matter. I'm not taking it from you. It belongs to you. You just can't use it right now because you're not ready for it.
Yes.
And then he reasoned with, and he's never had
Never
an
been an
upset.
issue.
But because
That is
I
amazing.
think stuff was always taken from me, never reasoned with.
Right.
And I've got no problem with him swearing. I've got no problem with him. He doesn't swear though at school.
Right.
At least that's what I've heard. He could well be, but he knows it's not a taboo.
Right.
It's there for him. It's just that he's not quite ready yet.
Yeah, of course. What is he, 8?
8 years old.
Yeah, yeah, of course not. Of course
Yeah,
not.
and I don't really want him going around the woods like cussing his mind out. But I don't actually care because for me it's just language.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. That I mean, there's so much we can say on that. I'm not going to keep you much longer. I just want to touch on one final thing. So, we talked about what you want to do for your sons and stuff. Like, where do you see masculinity going forward, especially with this feminine push? What do men today, like if you're speaking to a bunch of younger men and men our contemporary, what would you tell them about going forward in this future? Is there some advice you'd like to share?
To be honest, I'm quite wary of the society. I'm quite wary of the power that it has. Um, but as I said before, if you're not the real or the true you, then who are you? Because I personally, similar to her getting into a cage, I won't be forced. My hand won't be forced in order to behave in a certain way or do certain things because someone else is telling me to do it. Um, my advice, I guess, is to just be you. And if you have the strength of heart and mind and have the ability to argue, then stand your ground because um, we don't. It doesn't feel like we have enough people standing their ground. And if people are standing their ground, they're usually the bullies. They come across as negative.
Yeah.
But there's some of us who sit right in the middle and we're able to see both points of view and get our voice out. Do you know what I mean? Um, yeah, masculinity. It's a for me it's still a interesting topic because in my workplace I'm very much who I am when I'm on the street, when I'm at home. I'm aligned across the board. And I think people just need to be, instead of wearing different hats, just be yourself in your areas, in your arenas, um, because people will soon see past the shit on the windscreen and recognize who are the true people because they stand out. Their presence is made known for who they are. Um, I think we need to. What's difficult, Brooke, is that there's so much information now. You touched on it about the internet. There's so much information that it becomes very difficult to digest what's actually good for you and what isn't. Um, but if we listen to, for lack of better words, if we listen to the spirit within us, we get some common sense happening there. We get some direction happening there. Um, and it doesn't. People will always use the thing, well, that's the way you were brought up. Well, for me, that's rubbish because I wasn't brought up this way. Do you know what I mean? I
Yes.
had to create this thing because I saw the need for it in my own family life. So, one thing I think we need in society, which has been said for, I guess, again, for the last 20 years, is we need more fathers. And it's not just the fathers in the unit, in the family unit, but it's the father being. It's the father approach to life. Don't allow the fathership, the fatherhood, the fatherness, if there's even a word, to be extracted and taken away. Fight for the father heart. Fight for we are all fathers whether we have kids or not. We have that approach. It affects the world positively. There's a balance that we can find when we have the mothers and the fathers, and in the world, in whatever you do, find that balance. I'm not talking about equality. I'm talking about that that presence. So my job description, how I would put it, is that I'm paid to be a father.
Right.
That's what I got. So just fathers, stand up,
It's a
be a
good
dad,
message.
be a father, and handle the world as the best you think a father could do it, because God knows we need it.
I mean, I could attest to that. Like, I don't have kids yet. So, but I do have like a lot of young men that I speak into their lives, and I take on that kind of fatherly role to attest to what you're saying about we were all fathers.
Yeah,
Like men, we inherit that mantle from our ancestors and from society. And as we've discussed, it's about taking responsibility sometimes, not just for ourselves and our tribe, our family, but it grows. It goes from that into the community, a brotherhood of friends and family, and these types of things.
yeah.
And that is the strength of society, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think there's anything stronger.
No. Men stand shoulder to shoulder, brother. It's like we're soldiers, we're warriors, we all, you know what I mean? We
Yeah,
need it just for our own mental health. We need
correct.
regrouping as men.
And we've seen what happens when men don't embrace that type of thinking. It gets very soft. It gets
Yeah.
very soy, and it becomes abnormal. I mean,
Yeah.
if the guys out there that into that is, you do you, right?
Yeah. Anything, man.
Yeah,
I'm not
but
gonna.
they're protected by the warrior class, the men who are taking responsibility. All of that is still on the backs of men that are doing their part, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
So Herb, thank you so much for your time, bro. It's been absolutely amazing talking to you again. And the bid, bro. Yes, it's going on. Let your barber friend know. What was his name again? We could plug him really quick.
Yeah. Wait, Papa G's.
Yes, say it again. Say it again.
Papa G's down.
Papa
Big Papa G.
G's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. He's in the area, but he's kind of far, not to give away where you live. So we'll just say that.
Not that I care, mate. If people wanted to come looking, they can come looking. You'll find.
So for those who've tuned in, thank you for listening. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I will put all of Herb's links below as well if you want to get in touch with Herb. What's the best way to get in touch with you if people wanted to connect?
Facebook.
Facebook is the best.
Yeah. Facebook. Just look for Brown Boy Music.
Brown Boy Music as the fan page.
Because there's a few brown boys out there that like Brown Boy Music. So at Brown Boy Music. Music is with a 1 in the music.
Oh, the I is a 1.
You got
Yeah, fantastic. Well, guys, thanks for everybody for watching, and hopefully we'll make this a continuing series. So thanks again, guys. Take care.
Champion.